All right, here we go. Welcome back. Today is a great day. One of the best days of the year, really. I'm John, defending champ, as you can see kindly down there to my bottom left. And I'm joined by my good friend David. And it is officially March. We're recording on this Monday night, March 13th. We got a bracket last night. We have playing games starting tomorrow. Thursday will be here before you know it. Dave, isn't this just the best time of the year? How are we doing, man?
It is, man. It is. I mean, I'm incredibly excited at the same time. Normally, this time of year, I feel loose. I feel relaxed. This year is a little different. I got revenge on my mind, John. I gotta redeem myself after my performance in this draft last year, man. It was a brutal showing by me, and we'll see what happens. I'm ready to go. I'm super excited.
Yeah, so a little background. We like to have competitions against each other. What friends don't? We did college football in the fall, we did NFL in the fall. But it really started with us doing last year's March Madness. This is our first time recording the draft live on stream. Should make it a little more interesting, a little more fun. So what are we going to be doing here tonight? The concept of our competition is simple. We'll flip a coin here in a second. Winner of the coin toss gets to choose between pick number 1 and picks number 2 and 3. We'll alternate picks snake style from there. We'll draft 8 teams each. At the end of the tournament, we'll add up the total number of wins for the teams that we select, and the loser pays the winner $500. In addition, for all 10 of you that are going to be watching this, since we're recording this on Monday night, it'll likely be up on YouTube Tuesday morning. If anyone comments down below a team that we did not select, and that team ends up winning the national championship, the first person to do so, the winner of this competition, will split their winnings 50-50 with you. So you'll make $250 for really not having to do anything at all. I mean, all you have to do is be one of the psychopaths watching us, comment down below, one of the 16 teams that we don't draft, be the first to pick that team, and then have that team win the national title. Easy enough, but hey, in a wide open year, you never really know. So what happened last year in our competition? A quick little recap. David won the toss. Let me choose first. I proceeded to select future national championship winner Kansas. He proceeded to take, with the second and third picks, out in the Sweet 16, Arizona and Kentucky. And if you don't know what happened to Kentucky last year, you're probably not still watching this 2-3 minutes in. I ended up winning 17-12. That was even with me biasedly selecting Virginia Tech, who lost in the first round. We almost did have to pay out money last year, as neither of us took UNC, and they were up by 15 points at the half during the national title game. But David, knowing and laying the background of all of that happened last year, how are we feeling? Because I know that I'm feeling pretty good and pretty confident heading into tonight.
I knew it wasn't going to feel good hearing the recap from last year. I think I feel a little bit worse remembering that you gave me a lifeline by selecting Virginia Tech, who was like an 11 seed. I mean, I guess they won the ACC tournament last year. We maybe thought they'd go on a run, but that felt ridiculous in the moment. And you still wiped the floor with me. It didn't even matter. I think my biggest mistake in hindsight was going all in on the SEC and not picking the SEC team that actually ended up making a deep run in Arkansas. So the key this year is, do I kind of pivot and go totally against the SEC and let last year bug me? Or, it's a new season, it's a new kind of conference landscape, just going with a fresh mindset. I mean, it's a little bit of me against myself in some ways. You know what I mean, John?
Yeah, I've given you enough shit now about last year. I got to turn the focus to this year.
Yeah.
Everyone's
exactly.
talking.
We're turning the page.
Yeah.
We're
officially
turning. It's one loss. We're going to be doing this for the next 50 years. The goal is just to not lose like 15 in a row where I'm paying John's future kids' college tuition. As long as we can avoid that and I can win sometimes, I'm a fairly happy man.
You can't be undefeated forever without winning the first year. So that's my goal now. But we're turning the page. Well, briefly, this year, everyone's talked about all year how wild of a season it's been. The record was set this year for most times the number one team in the country lost. We had the preseason number one team in the country, North Carolina, not even make the tournament. Only 2 teams with better than 12-1 odds right now on FanDuel entering the field. That's Houston at plus 500 and Alabama at plus 800. Field truly is wide open. At the same time, there are some things that generally translate to winning in this tournament year over year. Not all teams are created equal, obviously. The questions are usually, are you experienced? Can you defend? And do you have high-level guards, NBA guards? The last few champions, Kansas with Agbaji and Christian Braun, Baylor with Davion Mitchell and Jared Butler that was an NBA draftable guy, Maceo Teague that was a great college player UVA with DeAndre Hunter, Kyle Guy, Ty Jerome, and that Villanova team that I know we both loved so much with Brunson and Mikal Bridges and Dante DiVincenzo. This year is going to be really interesting. What I'm most excited about, I know we've talked about this, but eye test kind of versus the number. I watched a lot of college basketball this year, which can sometimes be good at this time of the year and can sometimes be really bad. I was at a bunch of Virginia Tech home games, was at every Duke home game. I was just at the ACC tournament versus I know yourself, you watch a ton of NBA and you obviously track the numbers. So that's going to be really interesting to see. And I'm going to make one more assumption before we get into the draft. We do the coin flip and we get going. If you're watching this, we're going to assume that you have some background knowledge of college basketball. We're not going to dive into the Brandon Miller situation. We're going to expect that you know who someone like Zach Edey is. And we're going to operate as if the names Ken Pomeroy and Bill Self and Mark Titus are all names that sound familiar to you. So with that, David, as the defending loser of the bracket pool, you get to call the coin toss.
Defending loser. I don't ever want to be called that again in my life.
Heads or tails?
I'm going to go heads. Let's go.
All right, here we go. Everybody can see the coin is about to be flipped. It is tails. All right. So I am going to choose to take the first pick in the draft. It worked for me last year. I'm going to do it again. So team over here on the left will be Team Yetzi. It's our marvelous draft board right here. And team on the right will be Team Lurie. I think that generally this may be more up in the air, but with the injury issues to Marcus Sasser and with the complete obliteration that they just did running through the SEC, my first pick in the draft is going to be the Alabama Crimson Tide. They have the best player in college basketball every time he steps on the floor. It's not just Brandon Miller's ability. They've got experienced backcourt. They're incredibly long and lanky. Defensively, they're intimidating at all levels of the floor. When you watch them play, you come away saying, this is the team with the highest ceiling in college basketball this season, in my opinion. And right, wrong, or indifferent, the draw that they have, I think, sets up the best for them for me to lock in a couple guaranteed wins. Obviously, nothing's guaranteed in the tournament, but I'm going to assume they beat the 16 seed. I like them matching up against either West Virginia or Maryland. The 4 and 5 seed in the South region are relatively weak. UVA, San Diego State. We'll get into that later.
I'd say.
Yeah, to put it lightly. And then coming out of the bottom half of the bracket, we have a couple teams that we'll probably dive into later, but Arizona, Baylor, Creighton, NC State's a team that I like. But there's no one there that you say, okay, Alabama's going to be at a severe mismatch disadvantage. They're going to have a big worry. I think if Alabama doesn't make it to the Final Four, it'll be because Alabama beat themselves. Something had to happen. Something had to go wrong. I'm pretty excited to have gotten the first pick in this year's draft.
Yeah, I would have went with a different pick with my first pick. But the thing is with Bama, I kind of tiered the teams based on like their statistical profile and a little bit of eye test. And I had Bama on like a tier of its own, right below the two teams I'll select shortly. But it was kind of in this frame of mind of their statistical profile has some gaps. Like teams that shoot from three as poorly as they do and turn the ball over as much as they do and foul as much as they do defensively, typically like are more vulnerable come tournament time, right? But at the same time, everything you just said, if you watch Alabama and you watch all these other teams, it seems like Alabama has the highest ceiling to me, right? I mean, like they're a pretty scary team, and having the best player in the country in Brandon Miller, who's one of the best freshmen of the past couple of years. John and I were actually talking yesterday about would he have gone number one in the NBA draft over Paolo and Cade Cunningham the last couple of seasons. I think that's a good debate. But yeah, I'm very high in Alabama. I think I see where you're coming from with picking them. I think that South region is definitely open for the taking. If I were to look at any potential slip up, maybe Maryland could be a tricky round 2 matchup if we get there. Maryland actually, numbers-wise, rated a little higher for me than I would have expected them to. But it would be pretty surprising if a team from the Big Ten, a conference that has struggled in the NCAA tournament the last couple of years, took down this Alabama team. So I think it's a good pick. But I'm glad that you didn't take him because I'm going to pivot to my pick. So I have the second and third picks, right?
Yep.
So I'm going to go with Houston as my second pick. And I'm going to go with UCLA as my third. So I'm trying to. Yep, you got them in there. Perfect.
Oh, damn it.
I'll start with Houston. Maybe we talk them first, then we pivot to UCLA. I think my UCLA pick feels a little riskier. Again, when I was looking at this, like you said, I didn't watch a lot of college basketball this year. I was looking at statistics. What I did was I compared Houston's statistical profile to the past 5 national champions, and they rated pretty much around or above average in every single category that you'd want a national champion to excel in, right? They score the ball efficiently. They rank 11th in offensive efficiency overall. They rank 3rd in defensive field goal percentage allowed, so they're stingy on defense. They protect the ball well. They're top 30 in turnover percentage, something Alabama really struggles with. Offensive rebounding, you and I have talked about, just as a program, they're probably the greatest rebounding basketball team I've seen at like any level of basketball ever. I think they have fallen off a little bit in that regard this year, but they're still really formidable with tons of athletes. They got a top-tier NBA guy that I'm really excited, or an NBA prospect that I'm really excited to watch too, Jarris Walker. He's projected to be a top 5 pick. I'd love to see what he looks like in the pressure of the tournament, if he can step up in a similar way to what we expect out of Brandon Miller. And on the Marcus Sasser front, I'm going in this with the assumption that he's going to be ready to go. He said himself yesterday that he was going to be 100%. It sounded, from everything that I've read and what I've heard, like they were holding him out for more of a precautionary reason in the AAC title game. Obviously, if he's not playing, that makes this much more risky for me, but I'm going to go with the team that I felt was the best heading into Sunday, and I'm not going to get scared away by this injury.
I think that's all very fair and reasonable. For 3-4 years running now, you've had a love fest with Houston, and I've kind of faded Houston in some respects. Sometimes it's come back to bite me. Sometimes it's been last year, Villanova over Houston ended up being a pretty big deal for me. I think by taking Alabama, I like Alabama's draw in their region better than I did Houston's draw. There's some teams in Houston's region that we'll get to later pretty soon here that I'm a pretty big fan of.
I'm willing to go into that too. I mean, Miami as a 5 seed, Indiana as a 4 is a pretty potential Sweet 16 matchup. I do think that Houston's 8-9 seed draw was the easiest that any 1 seed got. I'm not a big believer in Iowa or Auburn, so I do feel like the path is clear to the Sweet 16, but we saw what Miami was capable of last year in the tournament run. I think Indiana's a little frisky, so that definitely caught my attention. I also think you could make a case the bottom side of that Midwest region is like a total mess, though. Like, Xavier is the 3 seed. I don't know how you feel about them, and maybe we'll see based on where you have them or if you draft them. Texas is obviously on a hot streak, but feels vulnerable. So it feels like that Sweet 16 matchup could make or break Houston in terms of coming out of this region.
Yeah, we'll without spoiling too much, we'll probably get to that at some point. I am and have been a big believer in Miami all season, which I think contributes some to my not lack of belief in Houston per se, but just viewing their road as a little bit more difficult than Alabama's. You want to dive into UCLA? I will say up front here, I picked Alabama first because I think they have the best draw, and I gave all my reasons prior. But UCLA is the team I'll be picking to win the national championship. So I am disappointed that you chose them because I was going to select them next. I had them ranked second on my list. I love UCLA. Go ahead.
Yeah, and again, given the injury to Jalen Clark, who's their 3rd leading scorer, he's going to be out for the tournament. I kind of had to make a call here of, do I want to pivot away from them? Am I going to get scared away by an injury? Obviously, this is a more serious injury, I think, than what Marcus Sasser is dealing with for
Yeah, he's
Houston.
out. He's done for the year.
He's out for the year.
Mark is done for the year.
I
Yeah.
mean, more from the perspective of,
Oh yeah. I see what you're
your
saying.
injury is more serious than, he's letting on. But either way, they still have guys who are super experienced this time of year, like Jaime Jaquez Jr. and Tiger Campbell. They've been balling the last two tournaments. I trust them. They get after it on defense. They ended up with the number one defense in the country per Ken Palm's efficiency ratings. They're super effective at preventing makes. They get up in your face. They force turnovers. Until they lost the Pac-12 championship, they hadn't lost a game since January, and they only lost by 2 to a good Arizona team. So they've been on fire. I think they have a really favorable draw with the Northwestern Boise State matchup on the other part of their foursome. Looking ahead to that potential Gonzaga matchup and what happened in the Final Four a couple of years ago, I think that's going to be on everyone's mind. But I think UCLA can beat them. I mean, they almost beat that much better, much more talented Gonzaga team a couple of years ago, and I think Gonzaga's worse this year, and UCLA is about at the same level. So, can they weather the injury to Jalen Clark is going to be everything. But I'm going to go with my gut here, and I think they're going to go on a deep run even still.
Adem Bona, sorry, the center, the freshman center for UCLA, got hurt the other day in the Pac-12 tournament. Didn't play against Arizona, but it does sound like he's going to be good to go. There was a lot of positive, optimistic reports that came out about him and his availability today. But I'm with you. I was hoping that UCLA would come back to me. It was kind of a bit of a gamble on my part, because I am and do intend on rooting for them to win the championship. I'm going to pick them to win the championship. Their road is undoubtedly going to be more difficult, having to go through Gonzaga, potentially Kansas or UConn, and then coming out of the right side of the bracket with Houston, maybe Texas, maybe Xavier, whatever the case is. I think the right side in that region, particularly out west, is going to be really, really strong. But they're experienced. They have, not just game experiences, tourney game experiences, big game experiences. They easily could have made it to the Final Four again last year if Caleb Love didn't make some ridiculous shots at the end of the game. They're just – I really love and enjoy watching and rooting for that team, and they're kind of everything that I look for in March Madness. And so I'm a little disappointed that you're going to – that I'm going to be rooting for them while they're going to be on your side of the draw.
I'm glad to leave you disappointed, man.
Yeah, it's going to maybe have to make me change a little bit of my strategy here. Moving on to pick number 4, I am going to take the Texas Longhorns. So I'm going to be in direct competition with you in that region, and I'm willing to do so. Texas is experienced, especially at the guard position with Marcus Carr. Sir'Jabari Rice was phenomenal all year. They did deal a little bit with an injury to Timmy Allen. I'm not sure what the status of that is, but another guy, Tyrese Hunter, a guy that contributed last year for Iowa State in their little run to the Sweet 16. I'm just a big fan of the way that Texas plays. I think that it translates to the tournament. They are battle tested through the gauntlet that is the Big 12. They just beat Kansas, team that a lot of people expected to maybe be the number 1 overall seed, by 20 points for basically the second time in the last week to win the Big 12 tournament. I really like their matchup with either A&M or Penn State. I kind of expect Penn State to make it through that A&M game. I really like their matchup there, and I like their matchup against Xavier with Zach Freemantle being out. This is a bit of a projection here, but I feel strongly enough about Texas's ability to get to the Elite Eight and then match up against that Houston team or potentially a Miami team that I'm a big fan of. That, ultimately, in some respects, when I filled out my bracket, I'm following the path that my bracket has taken me and where I have these teams going in the bracket. And Texas was next on the list for me. So I'm going to go Texas.
I'm shocked, honestly, but I see your logic. I do think that second round matchup with A&M or Penn State could be really tricky. Texas is a little weird, right? Like on the surface, they're like one of only a handful of teams that have a top 20 offense and a top 20 defense. But if you dig in a little further, it's not the prettiest way that they get to it, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're not the best shooting team when you watch them. They're kind of chaotic. but in a good way. They can overwhelm or out tough you, and they can overwhelm you athletically. And the performance does speak for itself. I will say, if my memory serves, the last time they won the Big 12 tournament, did they not lose to Abilene Christian in the first round?
I think you might be right about that.
So my fingers are crossed that Colgate pulls off a similar miracle and puts me in pole position here. But I think if they get past that second round matchup, like we've kind of talked about with some of these teams, or that second round game actually seems trickier than the potential Sweet 16 matchup, they could be off and running. Do I feel like they can beat Houston in a potential Elite Eight matchup? Feels like a stretch, but I guess it's, we're not talking about like one of those elite Duke or Kentucky teams of years past, right? Like Houston's a favorite, but they don't feel like a Goliath. They still feel a little bit like Gonzaga-ish, where like we're kind of waiting for, the ball to drop on them. So we'll see. But
so one more point to just finish off the Texas conversation. I mentioned the kind of the three things that I really look for. Can you defend? Do you have experienced high-level guards? And do you have some guys that will get a shot at playing in the league? Texas is one of 4 teams in the country that is top 20 in both offense and defense on KenPom. They're ranked 11th in defense. They can really defend. And of those teams that I just mentioned, of the 4 that are ranked in the top 20 on both offense and defense, 2 of them have already been selected. They were our first 2 picks, and one of them is in a substantially more difficult region than the team that I just selected. So at the end of the day, I'm feeling good about having Texas on my side. I have them as a Final Four team. If I'm going to have them as a Final Four team and I have the chance to draft them in one of my first few picks, I'm going to take them.
Yeah, man, I can't argue with that. I hate myself for this next pick, and you're gonna laugh, but I'm kind of zagging here. I've been kind of talking down about this team for a while, but they've kind of won me over in studying them a bit more. I'm going with Purdue here, John.
Oh shit!
That second round matchup is very scary. After what we saw Memphis do to Houston yesterday, even Florida Atlantic, they went 31-3 this year. So Purdue got the hardest 8-9 draw of any of the 1 seeds, which I believe they were the 4th overall 1 seed. So that does make sense. But they're a good team, man. Like, they're a balanced team. If you think Brandon Miller is the best player in the country, which I'd agree with you. I mean, Zach Edey is definitely one of the top 3 or 5 players. I mean, he's a guy who's propping up this offense basically by himself. They're a terrible 3-point shooting team, which is a little weird, but just having him to get to crash the offensive glass and, draw fouls, that's what keeps their offense churning. I suppose there's some variance involved in how he's officiated in the tournament, but I believe he can dominate. I don't think any team has a player that can match up with him. He's going to get his, and they defend well enough to, leave me feeling more confident about them than I thought I would be heading in. They're 26th in overall defensive efficiency. I feel like Purdue teams in years past have been more tilted towards really great offense and bad defense. This Purdue team is more balanced. They also have a good recent tournament resume. If you really look into it, like, they lost to St. Peter's last year in the Sweet 16. That's almost unforgivable as a 3 seed losing to a 15 seed. But they did make the Sweet 16 again. They've made the Sweet 16 in 4 of the last 5 tournaments. I feel like they're more dependable than we give them credit for. In their non-conference schedule, the last thing I'll make a point on, sometimes you can throw away these results, but theirs are pretty hard to ignore. They killed Gonzaga. They killed Duke. They went on the Big Ten. They went on the road a lot in the Big Ten and won. They won at Michigan State, at Michigan, at Wisconsin. A lot of the top teams kind of defend their home court and don't win on the road. I like that Purdue did both. I'm taking them here. I get a 1 seed at the 5th pick. I get 3 out of the 4 1 seeds overall. Or no, sorry, UCLA wasn't. So I get 2 of the 4 1 seeds, and UCLA.
2 out of the 4 1 seeds.
So UCLA is the 2 seed in the West region, so I almost consider them a 1 seed.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Well, I'll just go ahead and make sure that ends up being the case where I do actually split the 1 seeds with you and take Kansas here. I'm getting the third highest odds betting favorite. I'm getting the team that has 17 wins against quad one opponents this year, the defending national champions. Interesting stat that Mark Titus said on his show the other day. When Bill Self is a 1 seed at Kansas, this is his 10th time doing so. 7 out of the the 7 out of the previous 9 times they made it to at least the Elite Eight. So you're feeling really good about a team that I do think has a potentially difficult matchup in the second round with Arkansas. I do think they have a potentially difficult matchup in the Sweet 16 with UConn. And I do think they have a potentially difficult matchup with whoever they play, whether it's be UCLA or Gonzaga in the Elite Eight. But a team with, again, this level of big game experience last year and this year, team with this much success under their belt, a great coach. Let's hope that Bill Self is okay. It sounds like he is. But whether he's there or not, they have a senior-laden, experienced team that the metrics tell you, the betting odds tell you is in good position to win a bunch of games in this tournament. And ultimately we're in the business of picking teams that are going to get the most wins. And what this also allows me to do is kind of take the opposite zag of UCLA in that region and say, okay, I'm kind of planting my flag that I hope that Kansas is the one to come out of the West.
Yeah. What were the 2 years where they were a 1 seed where they didn't get to the Elite Eight? I mean, I remember the Northern Iowa.
There's 1 year they lost to Northern Iowa, Ali for Oakmanesh, and then there's 1 year they lost to Stanford in the 8-9 game, or after the 8-9 game. I don't remember exactly what year.
I don't remember that game at all. Wow.
But they lost to Stanford. Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. I had Kansas a bit lower on my rankings, actually. I had them as like my 10th rated team. I'm not saying I would have drafted them that low because it's Kansas and you just kind of – it's that front of the jersey syndrome where even if the numbers don't suggest they're a great team, and I know they're a 1 seed, but like they have some holes, you still feel like in those big games they're kind of the alpha team. The other team's intimidated, like, oh, wow, we're playing Kansas. But – Bill Self was talking about how they couldn't match last year's talent, but they're equally competitive to that national championship team. I thought that was a great way to describe them. There are times where you'd watch them for a half and they look completely mediocre. And then in typical Kansas fashion, they just overwhelm teams with their intensity. And, you know, that experience matters a lot in March. Jalen Wilson and DeJuan Harris were key contributors on the team last year. I believe they'll produce in big moments. I know we've talked about it, John. I love DeJuan Harris. I just think he's such a pure point guard. He's got a great feel for the game. He's always getting his teammates involved in the right spots. And when he needs to knock down a shot himself, he will. One major thing they don't have that they had last year, David McCormick was massive for them in the tournament. Just that physical presence on the interior. I don't really feel like they have that. Their rebounding numbers left a lot to be desired, especially for a team with, Kansas's talent. So given that their shooting runs hot and cold, I do feel like that offense could eventually bite them. And I do agree with you that their path is very difficult. I think Arkansas is a potentially dangerous second-round team, and that 4 or 5 matchup with UConn and St. Mary's could be really interesting if one of those teams makes it out. So I get the logic. I think ride the Big 12 until, they tell you not to give them the benefit of the doubt. And Kansas was the best Big 12 team.
First of all, I had to go turn some lights on. It was getting dark in here. It got dark kind of quickly. Had the shade open. Had to go flip some lights on.
Yeah, I saw you left. I was like, I got to keep talking. I don't know how long I'm going to have to, but
no, I just had to go turn the light on. Maybe the Big 12 is my version of your SEC last year, but if I have a chance to get a 1 seed with the 6th pick in the draft, hard for me to pass that up. So,
yeah, man. I got to put some thought into who I want to go with next.
While you're thinking, I should note I did not even have Purdue listed on my draft board.
Wow.
So you could have taken them. You could have hypothetically taken them with the 15th pick because they're going to lose to Memphis.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I know that's how you were feeling about UNC beating Baylor last year, and you were proven right. So we'll see if that happens again. I think I'm going to take Arizona here. I like the part of the bracket that they ended up in. They're not as good as last year's team. They haven't made a Final Four since 2001, and it feels like they're a 1 or a 2 seed every year. It also does feel like they win a few games in the tournament every year too, though. Like I feel like their floor is pretty high. They had Ben Mathurin last year. They had a higher ceiling. They're still a really good team this year, though. Super efficient on offense. They shoot well. They're good enough on defense. They're smart. Like, they might not overwhelm you athletically, but they don't commit dumb fouls and kind of hand out points in that manner. They won the season series against a UCLA team that you think is going to win it all. I think that's impressive, even if UCLA lost a key starter in the Pac-12 title game. They had a pretty good non-conference resume as well. They beat Tennessee. They beat Indiana. They just kind of win. It's under the radar, but they rack up wins. It's a fairly safe pick. Their 3 seed on their side of the region's Baylor, who I think they can beat. And there's Creighton and NC State, two interesting teams. I think Arizona has a pretty clear path to the Elite Eight. They could certainly blow it. And when they get to the Elite Eight, they get a Bama team that I think, while having that favorite status, has its flaws. And that could be a really interesting matchup. So I think there's Final Four upside here. I mean, it's got to happen one of these years. It's been over 20 years since Arizona's made the Final Four, John. How is that?
I would not have guessed that. I would have guessed it was a lot more recently than that. The thing about Arizona that I'll say, I would have taken Arizona, or they would have been a team that I considered had I not had Alabama. Obviously, like, had I gotten the slots where you were 2 and 3, I would have been a little higher on Arizona, but they were a little down my list. You know, I talked about what you kind of have to win a title, and Arizona this year has one guy in Sam Vecenie's top 100 on the Athletic. That's Azuolas Tubelis. He's number 74 on that list. That's usually not a good sign when you have no quote unquote draftable guys on your team heading into the tournament. You know, this is a lot different version than last year's team. I know you brought that up, but that team had Benedict Mathurin. They got picked number 6. That had Dalen Terry. That was, the 18th pick in the draft. Christian Coloco was picked number 33. Just isn't the same team. And I do worry a little bit about, I don't know. I think that they have a great draw. But I don't know. There's just something about that team that feels like it's missing to me. I don't love their guards and their wing play. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not flashy. Does anyone in their part of the bracket other than Baylor have a really high level future NBA guy though?
It depends on how you feel about Terquavion Smith, who's probably going to be a first round pick.
Yeah.
Now Creighton doesn't. Baylor's got some good players, but they can't guard anybody. I think that, I'm not Utah State or Missouri.
Right.
Arizona's probably I think you can comfortably pencil Arizona into the Sweet 16. And like I said, if I didn't have Alabama, I would make the same selection. But that whole region in general just feels like it's going to kind of be one of those things where Alabama and Arizona cruise a little, and then the rest of it in the middle is just kind of all jumbled up with a bunch of upsets. It feels like one of those regions where they head to Louisville and you've got 2 heavy favorites in that Sweet 16 matchup games where it's, I don't know. We'll see.
Charleston versus Bama or something like that.
I get the pick. Pick. I'm going to take Marquette here. I'm going to take Marquette. So first and foremost, I think the Big East has been a really good conference this year. There's some really good teams. There's really good basketball being played, and they went 28-6 through a pretty difficult schedule. It's a team that blew out Baylor by 26 points. They beat UConn, they beat Providence a couple times, they beat Creighton. They absolutely cruised through the Big East. I think they're on a 10-game winning streak right now. I guess when I say cruised, they did play really competitive games against St. John's and UConn, but they did win both those games, and then they beat Xavier pretty handily. But it's a balanced team. Cam Jones is a bucket getter. Tyler Kolek, I'm sure that Ryan and Chirag, when they watch this, are going to be laughing because he's the stereotypical white point guard that takes care of the ball that always seems to be on the teams that I end up picking in March Madness. But he's a really, really solid player, well coached by Shaka Smart, and I love their draw. absolutely love their draw. They're going to play who's second round. I believe it's Michigan State or USC.
Michigan State, USC, yeah.
Confidence in either of those teams. I've watched Kansas State multiple times this year when they play teams that can pressure you and have length. Really struggle. A couple games against TCU stand out to me, and Kentucky has been incredibly inconsistent. With this selection, I'm basically penciling Marquette into the Elite Eight with, I think, the potential to make it to the Final Four. Love their draw, love their team. They've proven it throughout the duration of the year, and I think that I'm happy to have them here at pick number 8.
Yeah, they kind of feel like a worse version of Arizona to me, which might be unfair. They might end up being definitively better, but like they have some holes in terms of their stats profile.
Yep.
They're 209th in the country in effective field goal percentage allowed. So they get lit up defensively. 257th in 3-point percentage allowed. That just feels like a bad combination, right? Like the right team could just light them up from the perimeter, and then, they feel like the classic team that loses to like a 7 or a 10 seed in round 2. But that being said, as much as I doubt them based on the underlying statistics, the wins keep piling up, right? UConn's been a darling for Ken Pom all year. Like Marquette took care of business there. They killed Xavier. So, I mean, fun to root for Shaka too. And a wide open part of the bracket.
Yep.
So I get. So I guess that puts me on the clock.
It get real interesting here because, as after you get past the first few teams, it's just kind of like who gets who, how it plays out. Yeah. It gets a lot more interesting of draws and narratives and who have you already taken and all that type of stuff.
Yep. I think I'm just going to go ahead and oppose you on that Kansas side and take UConn. I mean, it feels right to have the Huskies in my corner too. Like I was just saying, from a Ken Pom perspective, they're closer to a 1 seed than a 4 seed, right? Yep. If you look at their non-conference resume, it was the best of any team in the country. They destroyed Alabama, destroyed them. They started slow in the Big East. They recovered pretty well. They were competitive with Marquette. It felt like if they got through that game, they would have won the Big East tournament. I don't mind them going into the tournament off a close loss. Sometimes I feel like that can be a good thing. They have that NBA level talent as well. Jordan Hawkins is going to be a first-round pick most likely. Andre Jackson Jr. is one of those glue guy types who might go in like the second round. Also, like Alabama, though, they have some glaring flaws. They're also very sloppy. They turn the ball over a lot. But they're really talented. And I think the ceiling is their ceiling is national championship. Their floor is getting upset by a 13 seed in the first round. So this is risky. One thing that I kept thinking about is we're going into this tournament this year. Everyone says it's a wide open field. Whenever that happens, I always feel like there's one blue blood program that still ends up being there, if not two, at the end of the day. And UConn fits that bill. It could be one of those things where we think it's going to be such a chaotic tournament, but like then you look at the Final Four and UConn and Arizona are sitting there, and then the other two brackets went awry. But I just have this weird feeling that this is the type of tournament that UConn makes a run in. I'm really curious to see. It's obviously been a while for them. And kind of furthering your point about Marquette, the Big East is going to make or break who wins this competition between the two of us, because I can't tell if it's a criminally underrated conference this year or if it's just not a good conference and it's going to get exposed. I have no idea what's going to happen.
I like your pick. That's who I had next on my list, even with already having Kansas on my team, to try and kind of lock in that quadrant. The thing that I'll say about UConn, that beyond all the metrics, they're playing both of those first two games in Albany, New York. Like that's going to be home games for them. Imagining them playing against St. Mary's in the second round, that is going to be a UConn home game. which makes you feel good about their ability to get to the Sweet 16. This is a team that was by far the best left on the board metrically. And it was a team that earlier in the year, quite frankly, when we first started talking about this college basketball season and the teams that we liked, we both kind of had UConn circled as a team that could win the national championship. They faded in the middle of the year a bit, but they really came back strong towards the end. It's going to be interesting to see. I'm over here complimenting your picks, but I really
think it's so nice to each other, man.
Yeah, I know, but I do feel like not just the Big East, but I'll go ahead and make my pick here too. And this was not a team that I originally would have selected because I do think that they're going to lose to UCLA. I also think they could potentially lose to TCU, but given their upside and their ability to potentially make it out of the West region and be that team opposite, this is a bit of a strategic play. Gonzaga is not nearly as good defensively as I would like for them to be. But they've been playing as well or better than anybody offensively recently. They're a team that has kind of snuck under the radar a little bit. They have some incredibly impressive wins. Like earlier in the year, I believe they beat – I'm doing this – I'm going to pull this up. I don't have it pulled up right in front of me right now, but they beat Alabama by, I think, double digits. Is that right? Yeah, they beat Alabama 190 earlier in the year. And they beat Xavier back when Xavier was fully healthy and playing at a high level. You know, they did play. They always challenge themselves in the non-conference. But the last three times that Gonzaga has lost, they lost to Baylor by 1 point. That was all the way back since December. So since December, Dave, they lost to Baylor by 1 point. They lost to Loyola Marymount by 1 point. And they lost to St. Mary's at St. Mary's in overtime. Those are the only three losses. This is a team that's been playing really well lately. They obliterated St. Mary's in the WCC championship game. They beat them by, 25, 26 points.
Yeah, and impressive.
This is a team that has gone to the Sweet 16. I believe the statistic was 7 straight years they've made it to the Sweet 16. Everybody on their roster that has played at Gonzaga for more than 1 year has been to a Sweet 16. They know how to win in tournament time. And Mark Few's a great coach. So I'll go ahead strategically, and because I could see Gonzaga making it out of this region, I'll go ahead and take the Zags.
Yeah, I like it. One of the notes I had written down about them was I think they can beat any team in the tournament, and I think they could lose to a lot of teams in the tournament. Such is life when you have an elite offense and you can't guard anyone. So it was the right pick. I was contemplating whether I went with Gonzaga or UConn. I'm curious, if I had gone Gonzaga over UConn, would you have picked UConn and locked in that Kansas side of the region? Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Interesting. So maybe I misstepped there because I was hoping I could maybe get both of them.
This pick will determine whether you misstepped or not, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think I'm going to break your heart here. It feels like the right point to do it. I'm taking the Dukies.
Yep.
I'm taking you guys because I know you want them, and I want to spite you, John. I don't know, like they kind of have some UNC type vibes from last year, where it's obviously like the name brand program in college basketball that sort of flew under the radar all year. Was having a bad year, and you blink, and now they have a 5 seed in the tournament. Their 4 seed matchup doesn't have its starting point guard. You absolutely despise the 1 seed in their region. So I get to kind of hedge against myself in case Purdue shits the bed, pardon my French. At the same time, I almost had them much higher than this, and I almost had them off my list just because eye test wise, they don't necessarily pass it. Like all these games they're winning are really gross, grinded out affairs. But that being said, I do feel like they're capable of scoring the ball at times. Like they want to track meet against Miami, then they grind you out against Virginia. That suggests they might have the flexibility come March. I think Filipowski is a stud. So being led by a player of that caliber, I like in this time of the year. I don't know, John. I mean, I'm guessing that was who you had. I'm guessing that's what you wanted.
Yeah. So I'm going to read you a text from October 21st that I texted you on the night of Duke's first open practice of the year, I said, the best player on Duke soon enough here is going to be Tyrese Proctor. Buy all the stock. He won't be a stud NBA guy, but he's going to be a stud college player. I bet everything I got on it. And as someone that went to every Duke home game this year, just got back traveling with them during the tournament, I actually had them rated significantly higher on my draft board, but I thought that I'd be able to let them slip a little bit, especially after you drafted Purdue. I was going to hope to grab them here with the next pick. But I'm really high on this team right now and the way that they're playing. And I say that as someone that has seen a lot of their games, but has no real inherent bias towards them. They've grown so much throughout the course of the year. And it really started when Shire gave Tyrese Proctor the majority of the ball handling responsibilities and moved Jeremy Roach off the ball. That freed up Roach to be a lot more of a attack the lane off of a pass, off of a curl around a screen kind of guy. Versus having to be the guy bringing the ball up the court. And Tyrese played really well in kind of that two-man game, pick and roll action with Filipowski and with Derek Lively. Derek Lively's accepted his role so unbelievably well for a guy that was the number one rated recruit in some services last year, who, came to Duke, was injured, and didn't really have a big offensive role early in the season, and has really embraced being arguably, I don't know who's better than him, the best defensive player in the country at altering shots, altering plays at the rim. Duke is the epitome of peaking at the right time right now. I've just been so impressed with the way that John Shire's coached the team. Even, for example, Dariq Whitehead, guy that's projected to go in the lottery or just outside the lottery, a guy that was a top 3, top 5 recruit that can really score the basketball, has dealt with a lot of injuries this year, has been up and down, and his playing time's fluctuated. Dariq Whitehead has really bought into his role as kind of a sixth man, guy that comes off the bench, makes a couple shots, plays hard when he's out there, and has not pouted. He's not complained. And a lot of times when you see guys of his magnitude coming out of high school, his pedigree, if they were asked to come off the bench and play a sixth man role, you wouldn't get the high level of play that he's been giving them when he does see the floor. I think very highly of this Duke team. I think very highly of their draw. I'm sitting here. We have 5 picks left to go in this draft, and I'm like, damn it, I'm a severe underdog, at least to what my mind tells me. So screw you for picking Duke.
I feel like coming out of last year, you were saying the same thing, and then you ran away with it. So you never know, man.
Yeah, I'm sandbagging.
High as you might be on Duke, maybe Oral Roberts knocks him out in round 1. It's certainly a possibility.
I would be surprised, but it's certainly a possibility. I'm going to go ahead and pick. I'm going to go ahead and pick. I'm going to pick Xavier. And give myself another really good team in that region. A little tougher knowing that I have Texas and took them so high. But I think if Texas was to lose early-ish, the only team I could see them losing to is Xavier. I feel good about Xavier making it to the Sweet 16. I was actually looking at a future bet earlier today. I think Xavier's plus 106 to make the Sweet 16. I feel really good about that bet. I would like them in any matchup against Iowa State, Pitt, or Mississippi State. So I'll go ahead and quote-unquote lock in 5 wins there in that bottom portion of that quadrant and just hope that one of these teams, not named Houston, makes it out of that region and in turn hurts. What was your second pick in the draft?
UCLA.
Or Houston. Houston was your second pick in the draft, right?
Oh, yeah, second overall, yeah.
Yeah.
My first pick, yep. I was going to probably go Xavier if you didn't pick him. I think you have to, just given the draw. I don't believe in Iowa State at all. They're a really bad offensive team with a great defense. I think I could easily see Pittsburgh or Mississippi State. They're the 11 seed that in the play-in that would match up with Iowa State, correct? I think whoever wins that Pittsburgh Mississippi State game could be in the Sweet 16 from this side of the bracket, but that game feels like a toss-up, so picking Xavier is just the smarter move in a wins pool. So I'm with it. They're probably better than I'm giving them credit for. Just kind of, I don't know. They don't really jump out to me as a 3 seed. Like, what are some of their best wins of the season? Do they have anything overwhelming in non-conference, or just consistency throughout the Big East season?
Let me go pull it up because I don't have it. I don't have it right in front of me.
Yeah, look that up. I mean, I'll make my pick while you're doing that. I'm gonna go. I'll go with Creighton.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
The
feels
Big
very.
East really is going to decide this.
Yeah, it is. Um, you know, I'm gonna switch it. Actually, I'm gonna go Baylor. I'm gonna switch
All
it.
right. Okay.
I, you know me. I haven't been watching a lot this year. I was going by numbers. The numbers overwhelmingly suggest Creighton is better than Baylor and arguably better than Arizona. But they're a team that relies on their size. And I feel like Baylor's the perfect team to spread them out, just bombs away from the perimeter and overwhelm them. They have, you know, NBA level talent. I didn't actually expect to pick Baylor, but I just can't get that first half against Kansas out of my head, and I'm going to
Yeah.
pretend the second half of that game didn't happen. They're also a 3 seed, right? So I feel like I'm locking in the UCSB win. Creighton has a pretty talented and frisky NC State matchup. So I feel like the bold pick would have been Creighton, but the right pick feels like Baylor the more I think about it. So that's where I've landed.
I'm not very high on Baylor. I've fluctuated on them up and down throughout the whole year. They can't guard. And I feel like they're vulnerable to either team that they would play in the second round, very vulnerable. I don't know. There's just something about that team that I can't get over. I liked them, then I didn't like them, then I liked them again, and now I'm back to not liking them. And I don't know. I feel like they're very vulnerable.
Yeah, there's really, I mean, who's the obvious? Is there an obvious pick on the board at this standpoint?
There's not. There's definitely
Like,
not. I
every
just
team's going to have a battle
right,
in the second round
right.
at this point.
There's definitely not. It's all, at this point, it's all about how does your individual bracket shake out? How do you see these games going? And you know what? We have 16 picks. We're ultimately, picking our Sweet 16, so to speak, that we think are going to make it 2 rounds. So with that being said, I'm going to take Miami here. I should have taken Miami last year. I took Tech over them because I'm biased, but I really do love this Miami team a lot. I'm taking them on the assumption that Norchad Omier is going to be healthy enough to play. I think he makes a big difference for their team. It sounds like it's questionable as to whether that's the case, but if he does play, I think that Miami's a Final Four caliber team. They've got elite guard play, experienced guard play, Nigel Pack and Isaiah Wong. Isaiah Wong is just ACC Player of the Year. But I think that their best player and their most important player is Jordan Miller, who's a 4 that can really do it all, can guard a bunch of different positions defensively, can score out to the 3-point line, really good inside, good on the offensive glass. And my impression, I know that a lot of people are saying that Drake is going to beat Miami. That's a pretty popular, sexy upset pick. I don't see that being the case. This is a large part. A lot of these guys for Miami are the same guys that did play last year when they made their run to the Elite Eight. And I think that Indiana, who is their projected next matchup, I think that Indiana is going to lose to Kent State, which kind of contributes to my line of thinking here. I think that Miami will go 12-13 to get to the game matched up against Houston. And if they were to do that, and if Norchad Omier is healthy, I do think Miami is very live to win that game. If Miami were to win that game, then I would essentially dominate that entire region. So I think it's the right pick right here. I love Miami's team. I do have some futures on them to make the Final Four that I'll actively be rooting for. And so we'll see. Hope they survive the first 5-12 matchup. Every game that we pick at this point in time, they're going to have the potential to lose in the first round. So
they're the type of team that I maybe would have picked in that Duke range had they had a better draw. It's going to be a gauntlet for them. I mean, Indiana getting knocked off by Kent State would be massive. But I do foresee Miami, Indiana being the second round game. And I think that's going to be one of the best games of the second round. And then having to get through Houston after that. I mean, they're capable. It did feel like though they made the Elite Eight last year, though, eventually when they played like a truly elite opponent and not that completely fraudulent Auburn team that I'm totally not bitter about selecting last year, that they got exposed a bit. I mean, they ended up losing the second half to Kansas by like 30 points, if I'm not mistaken. But they're really good, and they have guards. I think it's a great pick.
It's going to be here we go. Last round, man. This is where these are, I mean, every pick is critical, but I'm really curious where you're going to go here because
I have been holding a team in the holster since you picked Marquette because, John, this is my number one take. Michigan State, baby. Michigan State is going to make the Final Four. John.
Oh, gosh.
Let's go. I can't believe I got him here. For some reason, I mean.
You can't believe you got Michigan State. You can't believe you got Michigan State in a draft of 16 teams.
Yeah. They're super, man. This is what Izzo does. This is what Izzo does.
I want to hear it.
He thrives on a free-for-all tournament. He's pulling it off perfectly right now, John. He's like, have you seen that movie Tar, the Best Picture award nominee? He's conducting right now, Izzo. He's in his bag, John. They all the way up to blowing like a 90-point lead with 1 minute against Iowa. Yep. That was step one. Losing to Ohio State, a 16-18 team in the Big 12 quarters. Step two, nobody's paying attention to them, John. This is all going according to plan. Izzo isn't fooling me, John. They shoot well. They defend the perimeter well. They have really good, solid, experienced guards. These are the same guys that went toe-to-toe with Duke last year and almost pulled off that round 2 upset. That Duke team, way more talented and better than this Marquette team that they're likely going to see. They're going to beat USC. Like, Michigan State, hear me out. You got to beat USC. Don't let me down.
They have here.
They have to beat AJ Hoggard, my guy. So what more can I say? That 3-seed, 6-seed pairing too. I have no faith in Kansas State. No faith in Kentucky.
Either.
You can have them. I think whoever wins Michigan State Marquette in round 2 is positioned beautifully to potentially make a Final Four. So I feel great about this.
We are at the point in time where difficult choices have to be made and where a little bit of hubris can pay off. So I'll give you that. I think that your strategy behind it is very interesting too, because I would agree that entire little pocket of K-State, Kentucky, Providence, I have no faith in any of them, none at all. And that contributed to my selection of Marquette. Yeah. But here's what I'll say about Michigan State. Dave, do you know what their record is in the last 2 months since January 13th? Today's March 13th. Do you know what their record is since January 13th?
I'm going to guess it's like 500, maybe even below 500.
Yeah, they're 7-8. I would be surprised if there's any team in the country besides Michigan State that is an at-large team. I don't know this off the top of my head, that is under 500 in the last 2 months entering the tournament, including a loss to, as you mentioned, an absolutely abysmal, dreadful Ohio State team by double digits just last week. But
all part of the plan.
We will see. To cap off our draft, I've been thinking about this, how I have to approach this strategically, because, who do I really have available to me? I have UVA and San Diego State, but I also have already taken Alabama, and I don't have confidence in either of those two teams. There's Creighton and NC State, which I actually expect Creighton or NC State, whoever wins that game. I don't really know who I think is going to win that game yet, but I think that either one of those two teams beats Baylor. I've got Tennessee, who just lost Zakai Ziegler, and then has a matchup with Duke. K-State, Kentucky, we talked about. Yeah,
Never makes Sweet 16.
I already told you I think Indiana's losing. Basically, the entire West region has been taken. We split that pretty much down the middle. So where am I going with this, Dave? Who am I going to take with the final?
Memphis.
I'm taking mother effing Memphis. That's exactly who I'm taking.
Yeah,
Give me Kendrick Davis. Give me DeAndre Williams. Give me that second round matchup with soft ass Purdue, who has no talent in their backcourt. Memphis is going to push around Zach Edey. Let him get his 25 and 15. None of the other guards, none of the other players on Purdue are going to be athletically capable of getting to the rim, of making shots, creating their own shot against Memphis. Did you see how Purdue handled just a simple little press that Penn State put on at the end of the game? Memphis is a more talented team than Penn State, and Penn State athletically was giving them some problems. I am not a believer in Purdue. I told you from the jump, they weren't even on my list of 16 teams. You had to know where this was going. I got Memphis going to the Sweet 16, and since Duke was picked by you already, now I'm riding Team Memphis in MSG to see how far they can go. I think that Memphis is a Final Four caliber team.
They might be.
In that region specifically. If they were in another region, if they were against Alabama, I think that we talked about this amongst ourselves in our friend group earlier of like teams that could potentially compete or give Alabama problems. And Memphis is one of the teams that we mentioned because of their ability to score the ball, their length and their athleticism. They love going up and down and getting in transition. If they're able to play at their pace against Purdue and make Zach Edey run up and down the floor and not even get set in transition and they can attack the rim, I think they're more athletic. Look, it's an 8-1 game, so they're not going to be favored by any means or anything like that. But we've seen Purdue lose some tough games early in the tournament in the past, and let's go Tigers. They're going to bring it to the line.
I agree with you. I think they would have a great chance of beating Purdue. I just think you forgot about one key thing, which is that they're losing to the Florida Atlantic Owls in round one, baby. Now I have my game. That is the game of any matchup in round one that I have circled now. Memphis AU. And I am all on the Owls bandwagon. Let's go.
You just wait till Baylor loses to the Gauchos in the 3-14 upset. And
it could happen. Same to you with Xavier and Kennesaw State, my guy. Kennesaw State.
Let's break this down really quick, just region by region. So in the South region, we had 3 teams selected. I got Alabama, and then you have Baylor and Arizona. So, essentially hoping that one of those 2 teams that they match up with each other in the Sweet 16 and play against Alabama. And then in the Midwest region with Houston, you kind of did the same thing that I did with Alabama's region, where it's the way that we should do it strategically, where you're going to waste your top pick in the draft on a team. You need to be operating under the assumption that they're going to win a lot of games, win their region. And I think both of us did a good job of kind of surrounding those 2 teams with the other guys that might have a shot in those regions. I think that the East, with you having Purdue, Michigan State, and Duke, me having Marquette and Memphis, 5 in that region, definitely the most that any of us took. That's going to be fascinating. And then out west, we split it right down the middle. I've got the 1 and the 3. You've got the 2 and the 4. In my personal bracket, I have the 2 and the 4 playing each other in the Elite 8. So that's going to be interesting to see. But on my personal list, I got 5 of my top 9. And I was able to get my 2 kind of sleeper teams that I think will make big runs in the tournament in Miami and Memphis. So we'll see. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up getting 6 of my top 8 on my list. So But what does that actually mean at the end of the day? At the end of the day, these 14 seeds are going to come in. Iona's going to come in, knock out UConn. Kennesaw State's taking out Xavier. Who knows what's going to happen, man? That's what makes it so fun. Is I can feel like I outmaneuvered you here. You can feel like you outmaneuvered me. None of it's going to matter. This tournament is going to be absolutely bananas. Absolutely bananas.
Before we go, give me 2 bold predictions outside of this draft that we just had. Give me 2 bold predictions. Could be the first round, could be the tournament as a whole. Would love to hear on Monday night at 7:50 p.m. What are you thinking about this tournament?
I mean, I went all in on my Michigan State pick, so I won't recap that. I think Texas A&M has a good chance of beating Texas. I really hope that second round matchup happens, just like an old school Big 12, redux type matchup. That would be awesome. And I think A&M is the type of physical athletic team that can bother Texas. I think whoever wins the potential second round matchup between UConn and St. Mary's is making the Elite Eight. That's my second big call. I think I kind of fell off of St. Mary's because they lost to Gonzaga by 45 or whatever. But the numbers love them. They do everything well. Really good offensive team, solid enough defensively. They have size. Up until that WCC title game, they seemed like a really intriguing sleeper. So I don't know whether or not to overreact from one awful performance.
All right, I'm going to give you mine right here. Mine are going to be a little bit more bold than yours were. I'm going to go with, I think in the first round, Kent State, Furman, and UC Santa Barbara, the Gauchos, all win their first game as 13 and up seeds. I have 3 13-plus upsets happening. I think Kent State beats Indiana, Furman beats UVA, and the Gauchos beat Baylor in the first round. That is one of my bold predictions. My second bold prediction is off of that being the case. I think that there are 3 teams from the ACC, the disrespected, talked down on, poorly measured in the metrics ACC. I think 3 teams make it to the Elite Eight, similar to how the Pac-12 a few years ago was talked down on all season. And then they had a couple teams, UCLA, Oregon, Arizona, or not Arizona, UCLA, Oregon, and USC that all made pretty sizable runs in the tournament, lower seeds. I think that Duke, Miami, and NC State all make the Elite Eight. I think Duke and Miami both make the Final Four. If Norchad Omier is healthy, if Norchad Omier is not healthy, I do not think Miami makes the Final Four. And I think that Duke plays for the national championship against UCLA. Those are my bold predictions.
You got NC State making the Final Four? Is that what you just said?
NC State making the Elite Eight.
Oh, the Elite Eight, okay.
Duke making the national title game and losing to UCLA in the national title, which would be really good for your team if that ended up happening.
That would be. Yeah, I mean, one of these, if not 2 of these regions is gonna go completely off the rails. It feels like the East is the one everyone has their eye on, but you never know, man. You absolutely never know. I think every 4 seed besides UConn's vulnerable in round 1. Who do you have winning it all?
UCLA.
UCLA?
Yep.
You just kind of walk through that. I don't know who I have winning it all.
Look, I think that if they had Jalen Clark, it'd be a lot easier to say I can project this happening, and I think a lot more people would select them. I think that the Jalen Clark injury allows me to take them as the champion without as many people picking them to be the champion. I think that they're tough. I think they're experienced. I think they're really well coached. And when I just look individually at each of the matchups, yeah, it's going to be a tough game against Gonzaga, but I think that UCLA can score more than they can. I think that UCLA will be able to score on Gonzaga more than Gonzaga will be able to outscore a really, really, really good defensive UCLA team. Yeah. I don't have a ton of confidence. I haven't had a ton of confidence all year that Kansas is like a Final Four caliber team, and UConn is a bit of an enigma to me. So now we're in the Final Four, and they're playing. In my opinion, they'll play Texas. I think they're a better team than Texas. They're similar, but they're better. More like they're. I'm just talking myself into it, but
no,
I think UCLA wins it all.
I think it's a good angle. I mean, like I was kind of alluding to earlier, we say these tournaments are going to be hectic. Who's going to actually be there at the end? All the top seeds are not blue blood programs, and then a team like UCLA wins it, right? The narrative makes sense. It would also make sense for UConn, though. Like, it kind of feels ridiculous, but numbers-wise, I think they got a decent enough draw with a vulnerable 1 seed. Like, maybe it's them. That West region's really interesting. I could see the team who wins that region be the one that wins it all.
Yeah.
Can't wait, man.
Hey, This was awesome. This was really
Yeah.
awesome.
So what did the final tallies end up being? You got Bama,
Back up.
Texas, Kansas, Marquette, Gonzaga, Xavier, Miami, and Memphis.
Yeah.
I got Houston, UCLA, Purdue, Arizona, UConn, Duke, Baylor, and Michigan State.
Yep. So basically, the two teams that I have playing in the title, you've already drafted, and I just got to hope that, like most years, I'm wrong about my picks in the bracket.
I mean, I think we took more swings this year too. I drafted a 7 seed. You took an 8 seed. I feel like
Yep.
last year we were pretty conservative,
Except for my Virginia Tech pick.
right? Which was just clearly a sunk cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, this is awesome. This was
Yeah,
really
man.
fun. And if anybody made it this long, through an hour and 10 minutes, make sure to comment down below a team that we did not select that you think could win the national championship. There's a lot of 4 seeds out there: UVA, Indiana, Tennessee. We're all
Throw
unselected.
Kentucky in there.
There's Kentucky, Creighton. Who knows? There's a lot of teams that Kansas State that we left on the table, 48 of them, and we'll see. But Dave, this was a lot of fun, man. We're going to continue doing this into the future. Hopefully the next time we speak, when we're recapping this, I'm kicking your ass again, just like last year. But hey, man, the tourney's here.
Yes, sir. Can't wait. Can't wait. This is me staying humble. We'll talk when the tourney's over. Hopefully a different result this year. But thanks again for having me, John. This was awesome.